Here on my channel, I tend to talk a lot about layering and different design styles to create that curated, eclectic look. However, I do recognize that for some people, they just tend to love one particular style, and this is the only style they want to do throughout their entire home. So in today's video, I want to touch on some of these more popular styles and how you can best achieve them within your space by just making small tweaks to elevate them that much further. The first style we're chatting about today is country interiors. Now there are a few different branches within the country style itself. One would be cottage interiors, rustic interiors, and everybody's favorite, farmhouse interiors. I find lots of people tend to gravitate towards country interiors because they do offer that kind of warm and welcoming atmosphere to your home. However, with that said, sometimes they can come off as a little kitschy, DIY, or even in some cases pretty themed. So I do find a great way to elevate a country interior is to actually incorporate different elements from other heritage styles. Great examples of this would be things like arts and crafts or Tudor. These are still rustic styles, and they're going to play on a lot of the same materials and themes to a country interior, but I just find some of these details and elements tend to have a little bit more sophistication to them. Millwork details are a great example of this. This could be any kind of wall molding, door trim, archway details. One of my absolute favorites to incorporate would be any kind of wood treatment to the ceiling as well. This is really going to give you a grand look within your space, but it still ties back to that true rustic nature of a country home. When it comes to some of the other materials within the space, again, I would recommend going just a little bit more sophisticated in these areas. So perhaps instead of chrome or brushed nickel, you might want to look at something like an unlacquered brass or even a raw iron. And the same thing for natural materials. While a typical rustic home is going to have more of a natural textured wood, sometimes opting for more of an oiled wood or a really dark stain on any wood piece, this is really going to take it that next step further, and it's not going to make all of your wood materials feel like they're in the same finish. And the same thing goes for stone. Sometimes in a rustic home, we can focus too much on more of that concrete texture, or maybe relying too heavily on marble finishes. So instead, something like a soapstone would be a great way to go. This is really going to add character and depth to the space. I would also recommend making the space feel just a little bit more ornate. This could be by mixing in some folky or heritage elements in your textiles, artwork, or even other small accessories. This is always best achieved by incorporating handmade elements. I do find this always looks best when it comes to custom furniture. And another favorite of mine is going to be pottery or ceramics, again, that are made by hand. And if your country home does feature anything that's a little too cutesy, I will say swapping this out for an item that's a little bit more historical is another way to make your space feel more authentic. And another great way to add authenticity to your space is going to be through your color palette. Again, you want to look at things that are a little bit more sophisticated. This could be richer red tones, more navy blues, earth tones, maybe just steering a little bit away from more of that all over neutral and light palette that most country homes tend to adopt. Contemporary interiors tend to be the go-to style for most new home builds, and I do find if you are somebody who likes to purchase your home decor brand new or from a big box store, this tends to be the style located within those stores. This more mainstream style feels very calm, minimal, and clean, but I will say, in my opinion, it tends to lack character and detail, and sometimes it can also come off a little bit cheap. So if you're looking to elevate the style within your space, I would always recommend focusing on the very small details and the actual materials you're using within each piece. For instance, incorporating pieces that have just a little bit more of a sculptural element to them is really going to enhance the silhouettes you're featuring throughout the space, and it's going to add so much more visual interest. And you also want to be ensuring material integrity on any piece you're bringing in. So for instance, you don't want to bring in anything that's a faux wood or a faux marble. Having an actual solid wood piece is going to tell so much more of a story within your space, and it's really going to elevate the look that much further. Now, even if you are somebody who enjoys purchasing all of your items brand new and you're not big on thrifting or vintage, the one area I would challenge you to push just a little bit further beyond that new home look would be within your lighting. This is such an easy item to purchase secondhand or off Etsy, and it's really going to give your home more of an aged and curated look rather than feeling like everything was purchased at one time from a very generic store. I also find contemporary interiors can sometimes feel just very one note, so somewhere within the space you should be adding elements of contrast, whether this is in color, material, or shape. This is going to give your space highs and lows, and again, it's going to be adding to that visual interest within the room. Personally, one of my favorite ways to add contrast in this way is mixing old and new. So again, if you are not a huge fan of purchasing vintage or secondhand, maybe there are just small elements that you could be incorporating this aspect into. This could be small accessories and accents. Things like candlesticks or vintage books would be great accents to be adding in this way. Another great way to add contrast is going to be through proportion and size. We want to make sure in a contemporary space that not everything feels like it's the exact same height within the room. You want to be adding different levels. Again, this is just going to be adding more to the visual interest of the space. Playing around with scale and proportion in the space doesn't just have to come from your furniture pieces. Sometimes some great elements to draw your eye around the room is going to be through things like draperies, artwork, mirrors, even lighting is another great way to use this aspect. Mid-century modern interiors is another very beloved style. I do think that people tend to be drawn to this one because it does offer such a nice kind of curated vintage feeling within your space. While it is pretty universally recognized as an approved style, I do find if you overcommit to this in your space, it can start to fall a little bit flat. And if you aren't actually using authentic mid-century modern pieces, in my opinion, it can sometimes look a little bit tacky. A great way to elevate a mid-century modern space is by leaning into other vintage styles. For instance, brutalism or other sculptural elements can add that fun vintage flair while just softening the space and taking out some of those hectic details that mid-century modern tends to bring in. And because mid-century modern tends to highly favor wood materials, I do find any new elements that you're bringing in, you really want to focus on other materials, things like metal, glass, chrome. These are really going to contrast against some of those heavy wood details within the space. Adding in a layer of minimalism to the space is another great way to lessen the visual impact of a mid-century modern home. I just tend to find the more weight you take out of the space, the more impact each individual mid-century modern piece is going to have instead. And if you have committed heavily on the vintage look when it comes to your furniture pieces, I will say adding a modern twist within your artwork is a great way to contrast the space and make it feel just a little bit more current. Another great item to contrast in the same way is going to be lighting. If you have great vintage furniture pieces, maybe you want to go a little bit more modern when it comes to the lighting you're incorporating in the space. I know so many people love mid-century modern lighting. Sometimes it can kind of overtake your home if all of your furniture is mid-century, your lighting's mid-century, and your artwork's mid-century. It can start to feel a little bit more like a museum than a home. When it comes to color palette, I do find mid-century modern tends to lean pretty heavily on oranges and greens. So if you are looking to elevate this within your space, you really could turn any other way when it comes to color. Some favorites of mine are actually neutrals or incorporating soft and muted colors. This really makes the style feel just a little bit more sophisticated and less on the nose when it comes to the actual style itself. Coastal is another very popular style that lots of people tend to overcommit to within their space. I do understand why people love this style. It is just very light and natural. However, if you do overcommit to this in your space, it can start to feel just very one note and a little bit whitewashed if you aren't incorporating any layers of materials or other tones. And I think one of the major reasons that it falls so flat is we tend to get pigeonholed into different themes within the coastal style. This could be West Coast, this could be East Coast. In my opinion, one of the best ways to branch out within a coastal style is looking to be just a little bit more worldly. For instance, adding different Mediterranean elements is a great way to take this style just a little bit further. This could be by adding influence from the French Riviera or the Amalfi Coast. It's just nodding to other coastal styles, and because there's so many elements of overlap, I do find that it's really easy to layer in within an actual coastal space. And when people are working with a coastal color palette, they usually stay within more of that neutral to blue color scheme, but I will say if you're broadening your horizons on what coastal means, you have so many other richer color tones to pull from. This could be darker earth tones, terracotta tones, even into more of the beige and brown family is another great way to go. And mixing in some of these global elements can be so fun to achieve through your textiles. This could be through more of a Killam rug, or maybe you're incorporating a fun pattern on your drapery or toss cushions. It's just going to take you a little bit further away from that traditional coastal feeling and really just liven up the space that much more. Layering in different textures is another great way to liven up a coastal space. This could be through adding lime wash walls, maybe a grass cloth wallpaper. My personal favorite would be anything handmade or ceramic. And I will say tiled elements tends to be quite overlooked within a coastal space, but often this can be a great way to add more color, pattern, or texture within the space. And you really can find them pretty easily at garden centers or secondhand. There's always some great ceramic pieces or things that have just a little bit more of a mosaic tile pattern to them. And while a coastal home can sometimes feel quite staged, I will say my one favorite element to be kind of themey within a coastal space is actually lighting. I just find it can be so fun if you're having some sort of funky lantern or more of a historical element when it comes to your lighting. For example, I'm not a huge fan of any kind of themed beachy artwork. I will say if you're displaying anything on your walls, I think something that feels authentic, maybe it's kind of sun faded or something that's more of like a handmade sketch or woven item. This can feel just so much more historical within the space, and it's really going to elevate it that much further than trying to stick to a theme or a kitschy kind of item. And sometimes coastal interiors can feel overly decorated or staged, so I will say if you are trying to achieve more of that authentic lived-in look, you can lean in a little bit more to asymmetry within the home. This can really help you get away from that all matchy feeling within your space. If one item is just slightly askew or something's just sticking out a little bit from the rest of the scheme, it's really going to give your space that feeling of unexpectedness. And again, it's going to feel so much more tailored to you and that much more authentic and lived in. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of traditional interiors. I just find them to be so thoughtful and elegant, but I will say sometimes they can come off kind of stuffy and uptight. When looking to elevate a traditional home, a great place to start is by paring back the scale of the items you're incorporating. Most traditional pieces tend to feel quite large within a room. Each element feels like it's creating some sort of focal point within the space. So when you are bringing in anything new, I do find if you look for smaller scale items or items that have a little bit more simple silhouette to them is a great way to contrast some of these larger pieces. Because traditional interiors can feel quite stately, I do find if you're mixing in fun pops of pattern and color in some of your textiles and patterns, this can really add just a little bit more of a playful element within the room, and it doesn't feel so serious. The same thing goes when you're styling little ledges or vignettes. Often in a traditional interior, these are done very intentionally and methodically. So if you do kind of pair that instead with something that feels a little bit more casual and has a little bit of levity to it, I just find this is going to contrast the heaviness of the space instead. Another great way to be contrasting with some more modern elements is through artwork and lighting. Again, with traditional interiors, these are often just very classic items. It might be more of a gilded framed artwork or even a lamp that feels very historic. So I will say if you're pairing this with something that feels a little bit more modern and clean, it can be a great way to contrast this and make the home feel just a little bit more casual. And just like any other style we talked about today, we do want to make sure we're layering different materials throughout the space. Traditional interiors tends to focus on kind of darker, heavier items and colors. If you're looking to mix different materials, things like linen, velvet, even going for something that might be more of a lacquer finish can add a great contrast and not make the space feel as heavy. And because traditional interiors pulls from very classic color palettes, I do find another great way to elevate this further in your space is going to be by using colors that you personally love or that might feel just a little bit more modern than the very dated color palettes of old. And just like any other style, these interiors are always going to be best achieved if you are actually incorporating pieces that have a story to tell or call back to your own personality in some way. And if you are shopping for anything brand new, I would always recommend looking for a classic silhouette or shape, but maybe in an unexpected or bold material. This could be even upcycling an older or antique element with more of a lacquered paint or fun pop of color. It's just so unexpected and it really makes your home feel that much more special and not the same as any other traditional home is going to be. So that's all the styles for this video. Let me know in the comments if I missed your favorite or what styles you want to see in my next video within this series. I had a lot of fun with this one because typically I don't recommend sticking with one singular style within your space, but if you have a particular style that you know and love and you really just want to focus on that within your home, I think these are some great ways to just elevate them that much further and really achieve a very thoughtful and curated home within the process. So that's all I have for today. If you liked this video or just simply enjoyed hanging out here with me, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like this video. As always, thank you so much for watching and I will see you in my next one.